This video is brought to you by mybookie.ag. This card is going to be pretty fun, man. UFC 278 headlined by Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. There isn't a lot of big name value on the card, except for the last 3 fights. The last 3 fights are going to explode the card. The last 3 fights by themselves is enough to buy this. Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards, a long-awaited rematch ever since they fought each other back in 2015. 7 years ago. That's pretty wild. It has to be one of the longest revisited rematches ever, right? 7 years after their first fight? I really wonder what's longer than that one. Besides, of course, like Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. Like, that doesn't really count. The co-main event, Paulo Costa versus Rockhold, is going to be an interesting one. Rockhold coming back. Actually, even Paulo Costa coming back and stuff. So, 2 giant middleweights going at it. I wonder if the weight is going to change. We'll see how Costa does in the scales. And Jose Aldo versus Merab is going to be an interesting one to watch. It's the heaviest wrestling style that Aldo's ever fought before. I mean, it's going to be a big test to see how great his takedown defense actually is. And that goes right into the prospect of the night, which is going to go to Tyson Pedro, even though his record doesn't look the best, especially as of late. Most of his losses came in his last 5 fights. He's a 30-year-old light heavyweight, which by itself is a good thing to look at. And the guy performs. He has the skills, he has the athleticism, he has the size. He just needs to put it all together against the top guys in the world, but he's not going to be fighting one of the top fighters on Saturday. It's a second tune-up fight after his long layoff, and I do like to see these kind of things with these younger fighters. Get their confidence back, get their feeling back in the cage and all that, because we all want to see Tyson Pedro do really well. The fighter of the night is of course going to go to Kamaru Usman. I mean, going on to be one of the greatest fighters of all time, attempting to reach records and lapping the division twice. The banger of the night, the most explosive and fun fight. It was actually kind of hard to pick one of these from the card, but I'm gonna have to go with Amir Albazi versus Francisco Figueiredo. 2 guys are kind of well-rounded. Figueiredo's more of a grappler than anything else, but he definitely has a unique style on the feet, very similar to his brother. Albazi brings it, fast-paced, high volume, goes right after you. It should be a pretty good one to watch. The fight of the night, the most technical fight on paper, is definitely that main event, Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards. There really isn't any fight on the card that comes even close to that, to be honest. Maybe Aldo and Merab, but Usman and Edwards are fighting at a different level right now, and with all the adjustments that they've made throughout the years, this is absolutely the best version of the two. And I don't even think going into the future that they're going to look better than they will on Saturday. And finally, the stake of the night. It's going to go right to the returning fighter, Luke Rockhold. He's in hot waters, man. If he loses this one to Paulo Costa, and he's a huge underdog, that would be his 3rd loss in a row. So he's never had 2 losses in a row before. He just got that in his last 2 fights. Going to 3 losses in a row, and it'll most likely be by another knockout. All of his losses are by knockout, actually. That could spell the end of Luke Rockhold's career in the UFC. Even though he is fighting a ranked middleweight, number 6. But the way that he loses, it's horrendous. Like, some of the worst losses in fashion you've ever seen. And with that, let's go right to our first fight. Jose Aldo versus Merab Dvalishvili. Hard time saying that name. I'm gonna get straight to it, man. This is a perfect matchup for Jose Aldo on paper. And he's the underdog. So right away, I'm gonna have to say, for anybody betting on the card, he is probably your underdog of the whole night. Jose Aldo is historically been known as the best anti-wrestler we have ever seen. There are some guys that come pretty close, but Aldo is definitely on the top of that hill. He has defeated some of the UFC's best wrestlers and made it look easy, shutting down all their takedowns. He's only been taken down at most twice a fight. And that was only when he fought Frankie Edgar way back in 2013. Nobody else is able to take him down more than once in a fight. He overall has a 90% takedown defensive rate. And now let's look at Merab's stats. He has taken down every single one of his opponents down at least 4 times in a fight. At least. Except the only time when he fought John Dodson. John Dodson's always been known to also have insane takedown defensive athleticism and skill. He took down Dodson twice. Every other guy, Marlon Moraes, he took him down 4 times. Cody Stamann took him down 5 times. Gustavo Lopez took him down 13 times. Casey Kenny 12 times. Brad Katona 5. Terrion Ware 5. Ricky Simone, which even lost that fight, 6 times. Frankie Saenz, and he lost that one 11 times. There's a drastic difference with the wrestling success of both fighters. Aldo barely ever gets taken to the ground, whereas Merab takes everybody down he fights very easily besides John Dodson. Taking down someone 2 times out of 20 is actually not a good stat at all. So there is a chink in Merab's stats compared to Jose Aldo. Now, stats don't show the whole picture. The way that Merab wrestles, it's a different style than anybody else that Aldo's ever fought before. It's that constant pressure, consecutive takedowns, and nobody's really done that against Aldo. Even Frankie Edgar didn't do that. The wrestlers that Aldo fought are more of this like American style wrestling. Powerful double legs, having the perfect timing on their shots, and using a lot of momentum. Whereas Merab, he'll oftentimes just shoot to create contact. It's almost like what you see with a lot of these Dagestani wrestlers. They will shoot, pause in the middle of it, create an interval into another takedown afterwards. So the first shot is to create contact, and then they transition into another type of takedown. That is actually something that Aldo hasn't fought yet, and there's a reason why a lot of people call Merab the bantamweight version of Khabib. So in a way, it can kind of show you on a lesser level how Aldo's takedown defense could stand up against that like Khabib style of wrestling. Is he going to be stronger that way, or is he just so much better when guys shoot and blast double legs like Frankie, Chad Mendez, Rockhold, Lamas, etc.? And when it comes to the stand-up, Merab is not dealing with Aldo that well. Unless he does get a shot in there, it is a fight, anything can happen. I mean, he even caught Marlon Moraes once after getting dropped a couple times, and that's a scary thing. He's getting dropped by Marlon Moraes, who's like a sloppier version of Aldo in many ways. He hit him with some like weaving left hooks, lunging in there and stuff like that, and he just ultimately couldn't finish him off. Aldo's a bit more patient, he's sharper, he's taller and longer. His activity with the jab is going to keep Merab at a certain range the whole time, because Merab just doesn't have many ways of getting in besides shooting the takedown. He will present some feints and threats up high just to get your attention up and then shoots at your legs. Aldo's seen this thing a million times already at the highest level. It's the same kind of game plan that many guys in the past have fought Aldo with, and it always failed. And you put in the factor that the fight is 3 rounds. My prediction for the fight, I'm gonna have to go with Jose Aldo, and I'm gonna go by a decision win. I think he will hurt Merab. I think he will drop him in the fight, but he'll be patient about it. He won't rush in the way Moraes did and gets tied up and taken to the ground. Aldo has also fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's gonna be hard for Merab to keep him down there and do what he wants, even if he gets Aldo down once or twice. And again, like I mentioned before, this is your underdog of the night. He's an underdog against Merab, even though stylistically, it's the best fight for Jose Aldo. And then we go to the co-main event, Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold. Both guys returning after both guys not doing too well when it comes to the results, especially for Luke Rockhold. The guy's been getting knocked out over and over again, and Paulo Costa is just not performing the same way. So there's a mental difference between the two, where it seems like Costa is taking more of a mental beating in his fights, and Luke Rockhold is taking a physical beating. His chin is just getting withered away every single fight to the point where it's like made of nothing now. I mean, he might even be getting rocked by the guy putting Vaseline on his chin, because he's going to need some Vaseline on his chin against Paulo Costa. Costa is going to go after this guy, and Rockhold's skill set is so limited compared to the modern fighters. What does he have? He has a decent left straight, a great left round kick for any target, leg, body, or head. He has a really good lead question mark kick, and sometimes turns that into a front kick to the body to push him away. All those weapons are for like the neutral, if not, he's pressuring you back. The only thing he does when you're pressuring him is a check right hook with an open guard. That's all he really does. Sometimes he'll try to tie you up if things get a little too chaotic, like when he fought Jan Blachowicz. And what happened after some of those clinches? They disengage and he got hit by that left hook. Paulo Costa, if he gets into the clinch with Rockhold and he's able to get out of there, disengage, he's going to start bombing him, man. And Costa doesn't have the most power in the world. He doesn't hit as hard as he looks, but he doesn't need to have like Jan Blachowicz kind of power or anything like that. If he touches Rockhold's chin, one shot could end this. And it could be actually the first one-punch knockout he's ever had in the UFC. And that's ultimately like the biggest thing going for him. Now, if we're going to talk about Rockhold's chances, he's got to get this fight to the ground or catch Paulo Costa slipping. Costa can get pretty reckless and leave his chin open, but he's a lot better offensively at creating space than people give him credit. He stalks you in a certain way. A lot of people think he's some like barbarian in there, like he just swings at you, but there's a lot more technique involved that a lot of people realize. His ability to go to the body and go up high, create distance and go to the kicks to the body and stuff like that. He's aware of where he's at in front of you most of the time, unless you keep a jab on him, because he just doesn't move his head off the center line at all and doesn't put up a guard to stop you from jabbing him. He's one of the most susceptible fighters in the world when it comes to straight punches. And Rockhold could throw a jab, man. He has a long reach. That left straight is going to be big for him as well. But the absolute biggest thing for Rockhold is getting into the clinch, tripping him out, and work his magic on the ground. Rockhold is way better on the ground than he is on the feet. Most of the middleweights today will not be able to handle Rockhold on the ground, but he just doesn't have the best means of getting it down there. He doesn't have like great offensive wrestling to get someone down. But once he does, he's like a building on top of you. It's hard to shake him off. Even for Paulo Costa, it's going to be the same exact thing. If Rockhold gets into half guard and then full mount, it's over. It's over. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I am going to go with Paulo Costa. I see him knocking out Rockhold in the first round. He's going to be extremely aggressive, extremely active, and I do see one of those shots eventually landing as Rockhold is opening himself up, that open guard, trying to counter his check hook and stuff. But there is that possibility again that Rockhold gets to the ground and actually wins this. A lot of people might not agree with me giving him 30% chance of winning. People think that Paulo Costa is going to steamroll him and there's nothing that Rockhold can do to him. But that 30% chance is alive. He definitely has a real shot at winning this. And then we finally go to the main event. Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. I'm actually super excited about this one. Both guys are completely different than what they used to be. When they first fought each other, they were both one-dimensional fighters. Usman only wrestled and he was somewhat boring. Leon just would kickbox with you and had no good wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at all. And he usually stayed in the southpaw stance and Usman stayed in orthodox. Now, they both switch. They're both great in the opposite stances. Leon in orthodox is amazing. He has a great jab from there. It's actually pretty hard to actually see the differences. He fights in orthodox and southpaw pretty much the same way. And it's very rare for a fighter to get to that kind of level. And as for Usman, his southpaw stance is excellent when he uses his jab and right hook. Everything else really isn't all there. His orthodox stance has more utility, but his southpaw jab is one of his biggest weapons. It's actually one of the most dangerous weapons that he has in his whole arsenal. But the thing is, Usman's jab, which makes up the majority of his striking, will probably only be effective if they are in the same stance. If they're both orthodox or both southpaw. But Leon is sharp, man. He's an extremely intelligent fighter. He knows to keep the opposite stance on Usman for the majority of the fight, especially to eliminate the jab and find his straights and body and head kicks. Leon's definitely going to appreciate those open sides and try to hand fight with Usman a little bit more so he can expose some of that. He's just faster on the trigger in general. He has faster footwork, and that's going to be the main difference in this fight compared to the last one. Leon didn't show barely any footwork when they first fought each other. He was a standing target for even a wild Usman to hit, and especially easy to take to the ground. When the guy's not moving anywhere, you could just shoot it on him and create contact, and he just ran him into the cage and then took him down from there. But it did show that Usman had a hard time taking him down in the center of the cage, which is an interesting one because Usman's wrestling has definitely gotten better over the years, but it's not like a drastic difference. And the same thing goes for a lot of Leon's striking. Leon is definitely a better striker, but he's not like a drastically different striker in terms of what he does. I mean, he still sometimes sits in front of you. That's why he got caught by Nate Diaz, where he could have easily backstepped away from the left straight and countered an overextended punch. That's absolutely what he should also be doing against Usman. That could be by backing away, taking off an angle, pivoting off, all that stuff, because Usman's best punches come on the center. He will sometimes be able to catch you with like a left hook like he did against Colby Covington if you get a little too wild, but in a neutral, intelligent chess match, his straight punches are generally the biggest weapons going for him, but he's definitely going to shoot takedowns in this one, and I don't see Leon defending all of them. His wrestling has gotten so much better. Actually, I would have to say his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu have progressed even better than Usman's striking has. I mean, the guy completely out-scrambled Nate Diaz, completely out-grappled him, and Nate is a slick grappler. Leon made it look so easy as well. Almost entirely got his back and stuff. Nobody ever gets those kind of positions on Nate Diaz. And as for the competition he's fought so far, he has shown somewhat good takedown defense, except when he fought Gunnar Nelson and even Vicente Luque. I mean, those were some concerning fights to watch when it comes to his chances of defending Usman's wrestling. Because if you can't stop Nelson from tripping you out in the clinch and stuff, and you can't stop Vicente Luque, you're not stopping Usman, man. You're just not. So at the end of the day, I definitely still see Usman taking him down. And honestly, besides Kamaru Usman, Dominic Waters, and I would say Bilal Muhammad, but Muhammad shot no takedowns, nobody that Leon's fought really has that good of wrestling in the welterweight division. Dominic Waters took him down 4 times. Kamaru Usman took him down 6 times. And then you got guys like Gunnar Nelson and Luque taking you down multiple times in the fight. That is not a good look at all. Leon's takedown defense has to be on point in this one. He has to show less respect for the striking and more respect for the wrestling, and that's kind of hard to do because he can still get knocked out. So he's left with little options here. Definitely be aware of everything coming at him, but the lesser respect on the striking has to be more about the technique and what exactly Usman throws at you. Just mostly straight punches, jab, right cross, or southpaw jab. Those are really the only attacks he has to be concerned about. Try not to get hit as much as possible and counter everything that Usman throws at him because Usman will overextend, generally speaking. The respect on the wrestling has to be far more present. And when you start to think of it that way, you definitely see Usman's advantages because he doesn't have to worry about Leon taking him down. The majority of what he has to be worried about is Leon's distance striking, which can come with many different kind of attacks, but if he can just close in past that long range, now he's in mid to close, things get a lot easier for Usman. Whereas Leon has to be worried about close range, far range, mid range, in the clinch, defending takedowns on the ground. He has to be worried about a lot more things than Usman does, even though Leon is probably the most well-rounded fighter that Usman's ever fought up against. Now, this all comes down to fight IQ. Does Usman want to strike with him? Look what he did against Jorge. He did take him down, but he struck for a lot of those fights, man. If he does the same thing as Leon, he might get clipped. Leon is a super sharp striker. Good counter punching, especially good neutral striking. If he pushes Usman back, that's going to be a dream come true for Leon. And he's much better in the clinch than he's ever been before. That was another issue in the first fight they had against each other. He gave Usman a lot of control in the clinches because he was so intimidated of the wrestling. Nowadays, the guy's super dangerous in the clinch. Elbows and knees, trips you out. His single collars, his wrist controls, everything is on point in there. But at the end of the day, as for my prediction for the fight, I am going to go with Kamaru Usman. I do think it's going to be much closer than the odds are giving it because they're having Usman as a giant favorite here. And it should be more closer to like a minus 200 in my opinion. Leon is kind of hard to blast right through like that. Even if Usman wrestles him for 5 rounds, it's not going to be necessarily easy because Leon's submissions off of his back are always going to be alive. He went in for that triangle the first time. He just pulled it the wrong way. And rarely does anybody ever shooting for submissions against Usman. There could even be a higher probability that Leon submits Usman than knocks him out. But Usman's not dumb. Usman's very smart. He knows what Leon's going to go for. He knows he can't be super reckless while on top of him. He needs to give him that kind of respect. And ultimately, Leon still plants in certain moments and I can see him getting knocked out. I mean, imagine if Usman hits him with the same punch that Nate Diaz did. It's over. It's lights out. And that can happen at any moment for 5 rounds. They both have great cardio. The perfect scenario for Leon winning this is constantly keeping the distance, constantly just jabbing and countering any of Usman's overextended punches. Because Leon is using his footwork, maybe he's able to hurt Usman with some of these counter shots and stuff like that. Maybe he gets a head kick in there. If it ever gets in the clinch, he starts unloading with elbows and knees and causing disengagements and eventually finds a TKO because of all this. That is actually one scenario that can absolutely happen. You can see Usman actually get shut down for most of the fight. And that would not surprise me, honestly. But more scenarios have Usman either knocking Leon out, taking him down and controlling for the whole fight, taking him down and ground and pounding him. It can happen from the first all the way to the 5th round. If Leon gets a little too aggressive, he can counter him. If Leon sits back a little bit, he might get hit by the same punch that Nate hit him with. There's a lot more possibilities and scenarios that Usman wins this, whereas Leon literally has to be perfect for the whole fight. And as you can see throughout the whole card, there's a bunch of big favorites and big underdogs. If you're going to go and bet on this card, there's no better place to go than mybookie.ag. They have fantastic odds, man. A lot of winnable fights here. And by winnable, I mean great rewards if you get the fights predicted correctly. As we talked about previously, Jose Aldo, being an underdog against Merab is actually pretty insane. He should be the best underdog on the whole card to win the fight. Stylistically, it looks good for him. Historically, Merab's fight against Marlon Moraes, the way Jose Aldo fought, Frankie Edgar and Chad Mendes and all these big time wrestlers in a higher weight class who are bigger than Merab, everything looks to go in Jose Aldo's favor. And not only that fight with Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards, there's a section of people that think that Leon should win this, but also a section of the hardcore fans that believe that Usman is going to run through him. So there's a bit of a difference there in ideas. Usman, though, is a massive, massive favorite. So if anybody actually does predict that Leon is going to win this one correctly, I don't think he's going to, but there is a possibility for it to happen. The odds on my bookie for Leon Edwards are amazing. And there are some odds I completely disagree with. For an example, Jared Gordon versus Leonardo Santos has Jared Gordon as almost a minus 300 favorite. I know Santos is old, and I know he did not look good against Clay Guida, but Jared Gordon doesn't necessarily do anything exceptional, whereas Santos is amazing on the ground. He has knockout power. He's a big guy for the division. There absolutely is a big chance that Leonardo Santos could win that fight, so I do slightly side with Jared Gordon, but more toward like a minus 150-ish. No way minus 285. An interesting one to look at is Alexander Romanov versus Marcin Tybura, with Romanov being almost a minus 400. He definitely is going to have the superior wrestling, but Tybura is not that bad on the ground, and overall with his kickboxing skill, he is a bit more experienced in that area, so I see Romanov definitely winning through his wrestling, but the odds probably don't match that way. And also with the heavyweight fights, it's rarely ever you're going to get a solid minus 370 as a favorite and it being correct. Anything can happen in the heavyweight division for the odds to be that crazy. But some of the big favorites that are locks, I believe Tyson Pedro, being almost an 8-1 favorite is something you don't see that often, especially for the male divisions. But he's going up against Harry Hunsucker, and Pedro should probably run through him. Now, Chiling Ari is only a slight favorite over Jason Perrin, but I believe he should be a bigger favorite than that. I think out of all the small favorites, Chiling is probably the best option there. And there's many more fights to go over. Just make sure to go sign up with mybookie.ag, and they'll give you that deposit bonus where you can match up your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. You put 50, they give you another 50. You put 20, they give you another 20. It's absolutely a great deal. Just use the promo code WEASEL. That's promo code WEASLE when you sign up with mybookie.ag, and make sure to do that soon as the lines are constantly changing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.